Next, we sit down with former Republican State Senator Kirk Dillard, now the chairman of the Regional Transportation Authority. We asked the former state senator about his accomplishments and regrets during his 20 years in public office, the details of his current position overseeing the RTA, whether the divide in the Republican Party can ever be healed, and whether or not a return to politics is in his future. This runs about 35 minutes.
Senator Kirk Dillard, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
It's always a pleasure.
I say senator, of course, I always think of you that way, but you're now a former senator. You left the Senate recently, the Illinois Senate, and now are the chairman of the board, is it, of the Regional Transportation Authority?
Yep, and Dad. Dad's the best title.
I thought about that myself the other day. My kids are much older than yours, but I said, Dad, and I said, you know, it still sounds good.
That's the best.
Tell us what you're doing with the RTA. Why did you decide after so many years in the Senate, and let's remind the viewers how many years it was?
I was there from 1994 to the present, so basically 20 great years.
And before that, you had served in, with Senator or Governor Edgar.
I was Governor Edgar's chief of staff. I was former Governor Thompson's legislative director, sort of his middle 7 of his 14 years. I always like to call them the glory years when I see former Governor Thompson. And I served as an intern right out of Western Illinois University on the Illinois State Senate Republican staff. Terry, I am so blessed and so grateful to the voters of the western suburbs for allowing me to represent them in Springfield. It's a tremendous honor, and probably, you know, will always be, aside from we just laughed being a dad, the highlight of my life is to serve in the state Senate.
How old were you when you started working for Governor Thompson?
When I worked for Governor Thompson, I had just finished law school. So I worked on the Senate staff for a couple years, went to law school right down the street from where we're taping this at DePaul University's College of Law, under the L tracks, as I like to say, in the city of Chicago. So Western Illinois University, a state rural institution, and then a big city private institution. But when I went to work for Governor Thompson, I was probably 25 or 26 years old. And you know, just an amazing experience to work in the governor's office. But particularly, I've been blessed to have great mentors: Jim Thompson, Gov Edgar, different styles. But you know, 2 people that I really have modeled my career after and learned an incredible amount, not only governmentally, but just how to carry yourself in life.
And after 20 years and the other experience, why now did you decide to move on?
Well, it's the right time. You know, there's a great successor, Senator Chris Nybo, who took my seat, so there was somebody of a high caliber to take my seat. The Regional Transportation Authority, John Gates was the CEO of Centerpoint Properties, a major business leader, was the chairman of that board for about 5 years, and he was stepping on. I've taken CTA, or Metra, the commuter rail system, almost all of my life. As a little child, we lived in the city of Chicago. We rode the CTA. My grandparents lived in a 3-flat with us. You know, they didn't have a car, so you know, I was a regular bus and L rider. Rode a bus and L as a young professional in the city of Chicago to law school, and I've ridden Metra to and from my law firm on LaSalle Street for, you know, more than 20 years. Our economy is so dependent on mass transit, and it's been through some tough times. And Senator Karen McConaughey, one of my colleagues from Kane County, first suggested, you know, you might be a good fit for the Regional Transportation Authority, you know, once you get out of the Senate or retire from the Senate. And then John Gates, the leader of the RTA, said, you know, you're somebody that gets along with the city and the suburbs, Democrat and Republican, because it's a bipartisan city suburban controlled board. So it's a really weird mix, Terry, as to how you get elected. I get elected by a very eclectic but very great board, and I wish the public would understand the RTA's board of directors has great business people on it, great civic leaders, and it's a wonderful board. But you got to be palatable to the city of Chicago and the suburbs, Republicans and Democrats, and apparently I fit that mold. Plus I took some and had a great interest in mass transit. I served on the Senate Transportation Committee.
That's what I was going to ask. Had you had, because I didn't remember your committee assignments, So had you been involved in these issues prior
Yeah,
to?
very much so. And, you know, I have been involved in transportation issues, but mass transit in general most of my career. It's just vital on so many fronts to have a good, sound, reliable mass transit system. I told a suburban audience just the other day, suburban real estate prices, whether you take Metro or not, are clearly impacted by having this great rail system that's been around for many, many, many generations. You know, and mass transit's becoming more important, especially to the young millennial people that are working in our economy. Motorola's world headquarters is in the merchandise mart right down the street from where we're at today. 90% of their employees take mass transit. And a new study just came out among millennials 35 or under. They're wired differently than maybe you and me. They expect mass transit to work. They take divvy bicycles, these blue bicycles you see around the Chicagoland area. They rent zip cars. Many of them don't have cars. And if we're going to compete against San Francisco and Boston and other major cities for the kind of graduates that are coming out of the University of Illinois or Northwestern, DePaul, Loyola, you know, these young millennial kids, these entrepreneurs, the kind of people we want our children to stay in Illinois, expect mass transit to work.
You know, I know in different cities, not to spend all of our time on transportation, but on that issue, you know, and I can't think of an example right now, but occasionally there'll be some proposal to require or encourage mass transit. And the thing is that fits Chicago. It fits a dense populated area. Sometimes then they apply it across the state, or if it's coming out of Washington, across the country, and it doesn't fit you know. Is that an issue from your own legislative background? I mean, is there a way to carve that out to keep?
I mean, mass transit's important to Champaign-Urbana. It's important to
Springfield. Bus-wise, but you don't have the...
But everybody benefits from a strong regional transportation authority in Chicago. If you're in Carmi, Illinois, the fact that we have a vibrant economy and our economy hums in northeastern Illinois helps your schools because people are working here, high-paying jobs remain in the Chicago metropolitan area. So anyone in southern Illinois benefits from having a strong mass transit system in Chicago. I'll give you an example of a study that just came out a couple of weeks ago, and that's Illinois has among the 5 lowest auto insurance rates in the country. One of the reasons cited in that study is more than 2 million people a day ride mass transit in Chicago. That's for automobiles on the road, which leads to fewer accidents. So everybody benefits from mass transit. And if you don't take mass transit and you ever drive in Chicago as a visitor or someone that lives up here, you don't want another 2 million people on the Edens or Kennedy or Eisenhower or Stevenson, because we've got nowhere to put these people. So whether you take mass transit or not, your economy, your school districts in downstate Illinois, your auto insurance rates, and if you're living in the metropolitan area, your real estate values all depend on mass transit.
When we say the Regional Transportation Authority, the RTA, what is the region?
It is about 8 million people, so it's really Chicago plus the collar counties as we know them. And we have people clamoring to expand the system, even perhaps out to Kendall County, but it's the metropolitan Chicago area.
And what transportation? No, so you have the elevated, otherwise known as the L.
We do.
Funny, I guess they're partly subways here, but they're also elevated.
You know, we are the RTA is the financial and regulatory oversight for the Chicago Transit Authority, which is the lion's share of the riders. Metra, our suburban commuter rail system.
I'm thinking of the people downstate who aren't. What is Metra? Is that buses?
Metra's trains. So your commuter trains, most of them double-decker rail cars, among some of the oldest rail cars in America, and we're going to replace them over the next decade. And then the PACE suburban buses, which are your suburban bus system if you're in Urbana, Champaign, or Springfield. You know, the kinds of buses you're used to seeing down in the capital city or around the U of I. They operate in suburban Chicago. So it's really the second largest mass transit system in the United States of America. Other cities like New York spends triple per capita what we do up in the Chicago area on mass transit. Someone asked me the other day, how come we can't have a system like London? And I said, well, if you want $9 and $10 gallons of gasoline, I could probably give you a system, like London.
Is that how it's funded? Is it a tax on the gallons?
Most of our money for mass transit up here comes from two places. It comes from a sales tax, regional sales tax, and it comes from fare box recovery. And I tell folks, whether they believe it or not, we are way below in terms of what we charge to ride on Metra, for example, the northeastern railroads, Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, our peer railroads. But it's mostly sales taxes. We rely heavily on federal funding. And I hope to get a new state capital bill, whether it's Mr. Quinn or Mr. Rauner or our next governor. We're going to have a capital bill. I always tell people that mass transit's got to be part of a major infrastructure or capital bill, along with roads and bridges. America clearly needs to invest more in our infrastructure. We've sort of slipped. London, to give you that example, going back to that, they spend 9 times more money on mass transit in Great Britain than we do here in Chicago. So we deliver a pretty good product at a much lower level of government subsidy than New York City or the European cities.
Yeah, I should say to the viewers, as we tape this, it's October the 30th, so we're just a couple of days away from the gubernatorial race. We don't know who's going to win, and let's talk a little bit about politics. That maybe is a good segue. I mean, it's a very tight race. Do you have, I mean, this will air after the election, so we'll know, but do you have a gut feel?
As we tape this, I do not know who will win. I mean, it's really amazingly close, at least in polling, and enormous amounts of money being spent. We've never seen anything like this before. Much more money than Bill Brady's race against my colleague Bill Brady, a state senator from downstate, who was a Republican nominee versus Governor Quinn. So the money's astronomical, but it's a toss-up. It's all going to come out down to turnout.
You twice ran for governor yourself. You came within a
200
votes. What was it? 198.
193 votes in 2010 against my friend
of getting the nomination in 2010.
And I came within, I think, 17,000 votes of Bruce Rauner in the primary.
Well, the first take to Brady, you lost the nomination in 2010 by 193 votes, and I know I've said this to you privately, but I've not heard of anyone who hadn't said if Kirk Dillard would have been the nominee, he would have beaten Pat Quinn handily. Now, it's always, you can't really say that for sure, but that was the consensus among everyone I ever talked to who, are the political know-it-alls, you might say.
Well, Governor Quinn, as he's proven against both Bill Brady and Bruce Rauner, should never be underestimated as a candidate. The man has, survived electoral life over and over again. And, as we tape this, we don't know who the next governor will be, but Governor Quinn, has made this race a lot closer against Bruce Rauner than some thought he would, and against Mr. Rauner, 17,000 votes is a little more than a per precinct. So every vote counts. I'm living proof of it.
Yeah, 17,000. So when you ran again this year, earlier, and the primary was in March, you came in second place again, this time by 17,000, you say, but you were not predicted to come in nearly as close as you did, and the amount of money that Rauner just overwhelmed people with his deep pockets.
Money is the mother's milk of politics. It's not everything, but it certainly helps, and it's very important. And in that race, it's a primary, so it's more difficult to poll, I think, than a general. But you should never rely on polls. I mean, Bruce was up on me in most polls, and had people really known it was that close, the outcome might have been different. I might have had more endorsements and other things. So polling is a two-edged sword. If you're on the downside, it slows down the amount of money you can raise. It also keeps key people from endorsing you if they think you can't win. So polling is. I'm not a big fan of polling. Let's that way.
I mean, not to bring pick at the scab too much, but I mean, have you put all that behind you, or do you sometimes think, my God, 193 votes?
You know, it's funny. I had dinner with Governor Edgar a couple weeks ago, and you know, he said, "Wow, you know," he goes, "I'm not sure I would take a 193 vote loss or a little more than a vote of precinct, you know, as easy as I do." And that doesn't mean that I don't agonize about it, but there's nothing I can do about it. You know, I look forward. I don't look backward.
Yeah.
I'm a person of faith, and you know, I opened this segment by saying, you know, the title I want is Dad. So I always figure that you know, the Lord is telling me spend more time with your kids. My children are in 8th grade and 5th grade. So there's upsides to losing. And as Governor Edgar kidded me, by not being governor, you know, hopefully I'll live about 10 or 15 years longer, because the job like that of the president's pretty stressful.
When you look back at your Senate career, and you haven't had much chance back because you kind of jumped right into the RTA job, which I'm sure is going to keep you pretty busy, even though you had, as you said, the preparation for it. What are some of the things that stand out in your mind as far as the accomplishments and maybe some of the regrets, some of the things you thought should have been passed, would have improved Illinois, but didn't get done?
Well, on a big picture front, I'm always proud of the fact that I sponsored the law that lured Boeing's corporation to come to Illinois from Seattle. And I give a lot of credit to Speaker Madigan and to Senate President Cullerton and my leader, Senator Radonio. But I was the sponsor of the work rule changes that kept McCormick Place the #1 convention center in the United States. I sponsored, talking about the RTA, a law, an initiative known as the Secretary of State's Railroad Safety Initiative many years ago for then Secretary of State George Ryan, which have really cut fatalities along the metro routes up here almost half. And you know, I'm very proud of my record. Before the current Governor Quinn, abolished the death penalty, we had a broken system, and I worked with my friend and colleague, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, and we rewrote Illinois' broken death penalty statute. I was the sponsor of what's known as the Illinois Internet Portal. Puts all salaries and contracts and things like that online, so improved transparency. I sponsored, at really the urging of the late Senator Paul Simon and Cynthia Canary, the head of the Campaign for Political Reform, I sponsored the first ethics changes in this state in more than 25 years. And you know, everything's online now, and as tawdry of a system as we have a reputation in Illinois, the bill that I sponsored was an award winner in terms of disclosure. We still have a very good disclosure system. Every campaign contribution is really available almost in real time of $150 or more. It allows for much easier tracking. Professor Redfield from the University of Illinois, a political scientist, you know, can track who's giving what. So we have a good system of disclosure in Illinois. And then I'm very proud of you know, my accomplishments for my district as well. All politics is local, and I'm very happy and proud of some of the things that I did locally, including creating the Giant Steps Autism school or program with former Congresswoman Biggert and my state rep Patty Bellock, as well as something called Coach House, which is a respite care facility where children who are on respirators and who are very sick have a place other than a hospital or institutional setting where their parents can you know, who are with them, trying to care for them all the time. If the parents need a day off, can actually get away. So I'm proud of what I accomplished locally and at the state level, and proud of my reputation of being somebody that got along with all types and factions and worked well with both political parties as well as a variety of governors.
Well, and you touched on a couple of things. Let me first, as a quick aside, this evening you're going to get an award from DuPage County for your work. What award is that?
Tonight's a political one. It's the Lifetime Achievement Award. I'm still in my 50s, so I haven't gone anywhere, and I'm still going to be somewhat active, although not as active. It's from the DuPage County Republican Party. I'm the former party chairman of DuPage County, succeeding the legendary Pate Phillip, who was the Senate president. And he was our county chairman for many, many years out there. But this one is a political award, and awards really mean nothing. It's the other people that did all the work. It wasn't me.
You also mentioned your friend Obama, who became president. You served in the Illinois Senate with him, and when he was running back in 2008, and I don't remember if that was from the Iowa caucus, that
It was from the Iowa caucus.
he asked you to do an ad, and that ties into you losing the nomination in 2010. Some Republicans held it against you that you did an ad in which you said that Barack Obama reached across the aisle and that he was the kind of guy that would work with Republicans. A lot of people held you accountable for that, as you well know, but for the viewers' sake, what do you think now? First of all, A, do you regret it because of what it cost you in votes that, frankly, as close as that was, almost surely cost you the nomination in 2010? And B, now that we have 6 years of Barack Obama being president, a lot of Republicans would say this guy's the most partisan of presidents. Has he disappointed you in his presidency and how he's conducted himself, or is it what you expected?
Well, his presidency is certainly disappointing, and I didn't endorse him for president. I was a John McCain delegate, the second leading vote getter as a John McCain delegate to the Republican convention. But the ad just vouched that he was the co-sponsor of the first ethics changes in more than 25 years in Illinois. And anytime a Democrat works with me on a Republican principle like ethics, I'm going to say, way to go, why don't you do it more often? It really started out as, we want someone to vouch that he co-sponsored the first ethics changes in Illinois. Really was under the kind of guise that it might be on an internet site of some kind. And you have to remember at the time, too, Hillary Clinton was just pounding, a relatively obscure Barack Obama in Iowa. But they called and said, will you vouch that he worked on this ethics bill? And I did that. It is what it is. My guess is if I didn't do the ad, I might be the governor today. But this country is too polarized when it comes to partisan politics. I'm against almost everything that Barack Obama's for. But we did fix a broken death penalty system in Illinois, and we passed the first ethics changes in a bipartisan way. I can work with somebody on issues that I pick and choose to do so. And he also had 2 young daughters, so there was a bond between he and I, because we each had 2 young daughters at the time. I disagree with almost all of his policies, but anytime a Democrat works with me on a Republican principle, I'm not going to shy away from working on it, and that's part of the problem in Washington and Springfield, is the place is too polarized.
Had you been elected governor, let's talk about Illinois. Everyone knows Illinois is in a heap of trouble, as they say. What would you have done to turn it around?
Well, I certainly wouldn't have increased the income tax by 67%. I would have applied the same kinds of discipline and common sense principles that we did as when I was Governor Edgar's chief of staff, where our credit rating went up for the first time in the state's history. We clearly would have had, an administration that was pro-business. We wouldn't over-regulate. I would have certainly expedited permits for job creation, never compromising safety, but a bureaucracy that would have allowed people that wanted to create jobs to get up or down approval of their permits quicker. I would have clearly tried to reduce some taxes out there. And then our biggest expenditure, aside from our debt service, is Medicaid. I would have really brought some common sense principles to the way that we handle Medicaid in Illinois. We certainly need to verify. We have thousands of people that don't belong on Medicaid, and those who deserve it would have it and have it a better system. We would have managed Medicaid a lot better, and we wouldn't have been out with newspaper ads, encouraging people to sign up.
You
really
weren't
eligible for it.
I think it was 2 years ago when they passed the SMART Act, and
Right.
Governor Quinn mentioned it in his his budget address, as I recall, and then And now that was supposed to save the state $1.5 billion approximately. Patty Belloc says, State Representative Belloc, who worked closely on that bill, said then the reforms after the bill was passed were never made, brought forth, and now the governor wants to expand Medicaid.
Right, you've got to execute what you pass. We need to income and verify residency day in and day out. Nobody has been verifying our Medicaid rolls like they should have. And if you're going to be a hospital CEO, and the governor clearly is over, a massive health care program in Illinois, as the governor called Medicaid, you got to manage it because it's so expensive. And most importantly, if you're a single mom on the west side of Chicago or in Peoria or Macomb, you're going to get better Medicaid services if we don't have people taking these services that are not eligible. You'll get more physicians to participate. We'll pay our bills to your providers quicker, so that you'll have more people in the system. And Medicaid has just not been well run at all in the state of Illinois, and it's really our largest expenditure. We spend more on it than we do on education, and that's not a good priority.
You mentioned, I think a lot of people would agree with you, that our politics are too divisive. You hear within the Republican Party, everyone knows there's a divide between the conservative wing and then those who, if you're not a conservative, they call you a rhino, a Republican in name only. And I think people have used that label against you, even though you've been a lifelong Republican, as far as I can tell, or know, as far as I know, I should say. Can the Republican divide be healed? And if not, can the Republicans ever regain control of government?
Well, you gotta, as a Republican, you gotta determine, do you want to be a political party or do you want to be a movement? And I think you saw, a lot of people said my surge at the end against Bruce Rauner in the primary was because there were Democrat crossover votes for me, and that was true. But I think many of the conservatives coalesced around me. I never voted for a general tax increase in my entire 20 years in the legislature. I sponsored tort reform. I sponsored the reforms that lured Boeing's company's headquarters from Seattle, Washington to here. Was always a near perfect voting record for the manufacturers and the Chamber of Commerce. I don't think that's a rhino. That's pro-business, pro-economic development. I was certainly somebody who was always for getting rid of onerous regulations that were out there. So a fiscal hawk, and on many social issues, I think I'd be characterized as a pretty socially conservative guy. So that term rhino ought to go out the window, and we ought to figure out how that we agree on most stuff that's out there as Republicans, and you shouldn't demonize one another. You should live by Ronald Reagan's commandment that if you're with me 85% of the time, you're my friend.
Reagan used to say, as a reminder to the viewers, that the 11th commandment was, "Thou shalt not speak no ill of a fellow Republican."
Correct. And I think people, especially if you go back and look at Ronald Reagan's record as the governor of California, I think would be surprised. And Ronald Reagan was a former union member as well. In fact, somebody who was pretty active in organized labor. And I'm a friend to organized labor. I pick and choose which union support I take. I'm not going to be with organized labor on everything, but this is Chicago. It's the city of broad shoulders in the state of Illinois, and we have a proud organized labor history in this state, and it's one that shouldn't be demonized. We want people to be able to raise their families by being a blue collar worker and have pride in being a blue collar worker.
We don't have much time left, but when you talk to people, I mean, knowing the government on the inside as you do, what would you want the populace, the people that go out and vote? I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was saying, just vote everyone out. Don't discern, and you know the frustration and how frustrated the people are. What would you want people to know about the system? Because as you well know, a lot of people think the whole system in Illinois is broken.
Well, 99% of those who serve in all levels of government, Democrat, Republican, upstate, downstate, are in it for the right reason. They're decent people. I think no one has a conception of how hard good legislators work. Term limits, look, I'm hot and cold. I'm for term limits for legislative leaders. But with term limits, you're going to get more power by the staff, by the lobbyist, and you need institutional knowledge to call, lobbyists and other people on the carpet. And term limits have not been the panacea in other states. They're saying that in some states it's led to the special interest groups having more power because legislators don't have enough experience to ask the right questions, and it's led to more spending. But I do support term limits for legislative leaders. I voted for recall. I certainly think we should not have had an impeachment trial, a long drawn-out trial on Rod Blagojevich. We should have been able to recall the gentleman. So I'm for not the status quo, but people ought to know that most of their government servants are in it for the right reasons. Sometimes their philosophy may be too liberal, and they're not out there enriching their pockets. I mean, that one just makes me crazy. I will tell you that most who serve in Springfield do it at a financial sacrifice. They don't even pay legislators the IRS rate for travel. I was kidding a state rep yesterday saying, each time you go to Springfield to serve, you're contributing your own gas money, or at least half of it, out of your own pocket. And, everybody gets in it knowing what it's about. But most of the people, you see them all the time, Terry, are really good people from both political parties, and I don't like to see public servants demonized like that, as well as most government workers, union workers. Most of the union workers work hard and they care, and they work on weekends if they have to, and you shouldn't stereotype everybody else just because you got one or two bad apples.
We could spend a lot more time. We don't have it, but before we close out, do you see any possible future in politics for Kirk Dillard, or have you?
Probably not. I'm very fortunate. I've been a partner at a big international law firm for more than 25 years. I'm back there now. I love doing what I'm doing at the Regional Transportation Authority. It's just enough of government involvement that that whets my appetite. But the RTA and mass transit's critical to our economy in northeastern Illinois. It's nice to be running something again and kind of being, in an executive type of mode, even though I'm really an overseer and other people make the railroad and CTA run. I don't do it. They get all the credit and should get all the credit. But I like what I'm doing. I like my life. I'm going to raise my kids, and it's just been an honor to be in the state senate, to have been a state employee for a number of years, working for two great governors, Jim Thompson and Gov Edgar. And I'm very comfortable and happy where my life is, and all I want to do is stay healthy, enjoy my kids, serve where I can. I still stay very active with Western Illinois University and DePaul University. So civically, I try to do some things that I want to do. Want to be able to do some things with my local church more that I couldn't do when I was traveling the state. I'm around on weekends now. It's really nice to sort of get my weekends back. That's one of the great changes, and I get a lot more dinners at home, which is also really valuable, to be able to have dinner with your children and just ask them, how'd your day go? Ava, what's going on at school, and help my kids with their homework. So I'm really comfortable where I'm at in my life, and I don't ever see another run for public office. I want to help younger people get involved in government, and I can pick and choose who I want to help.
All right, well, Senator Kirk Dillard, we
Thanks,
appreciate
Jim.
you visiting again with us.
It's always good to be here, and hopefully I'll continue every now and then to be worthy of the Illinois Channel. And you do provide a wonderful, wonderful service to the people of this state. I think more people would benefit by watching, and you have eclectic things on the Illinois Channel. It's a great thing.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.